1930s, the unions SAG and AFTRA have been advocating and protecting the rights of performing artists in media. Well, times have changed, but that doesn't mean the mission has. Managing these complicated arenas, I'm delighted to be joined by SAG COO and General Counsel, Duncan Crabtree-Ireland. Now that's a name for a marquee right then and there.
Yeah, I've often been told it sounds like I'm a law firm all by myself, but clearly hyphenated names are the way to go.
You bet. So a lot is going on within the industry right now, but most importantly, the fact that production is starting to begin again. But with performing artists, I imagine there are a lot of rules and regs. So what are the protections that you are offering your performers to make sure that they're safe in the workplace?
It's been a tough time, of course. It's been several months since anyone's been able to really get on a set and do any kind of production. We estimate that our members have lost around $500 million in earnings during this time period. And that's not just big stars, that's a lot of working performers who rely on their income to pay a mortgage and pay their rent and buy groceries and things like that. So we're really focused on helping everyone get back to work, but it has to be safe. So the kind of protections, like you asked, that we're looking for are really focused on, number one, making sure that there's some form of testing in place, COVID testing, for people who are going to be working either as performers or with performers who have to work with no protective equipment on or without physical distancing in many cases. In addition to that, we're looking for a zone system to be established on set. That basically means that there would be this sort of zone A area, the central zone, where performers and those who have to work directly with them are sort of in that zone. And then the rest of the crew who don't need to have direct contact with performers when they're not wearing masks, when they're not physically distanced, can be in a sort of outer zone. And why this is important is it helps inform the question of when people get tested, how frequently they get tested, things like that. We've actually had the chance to work together both with the industry on a document that we've put out that lays out a lot of protocols, and also separately with a group of the main labor unions in the industry. And we've really come up with what we think is a plan that can be practically implemented, but that also provides a high degree of safety for the performers and the crew who have to be working under those conditions. And so it really isn't going to be business as usual, but business can be done, we think, with those kind of protections in place.
One of the early adapters was the daytime drama Bold and Beautiful. It started back into production and then paused production. What happened?
Well, as far as specific productions, I'm not really at liberty to comment on their productions. But what I can tell you is, in general terms, a few things. We've had a number of different productions start. We've had some commercials kick back in. We have some feature films that are shooting both here in Southern California and also around the world. And we have some television projects, like the one you mentioned, that have started back. In general, what those productions are finding is that the testing piece is really important, because if you don't test people prior to everyone returning to set and then regularly test them thereafter, what's going to potentially happen is you may have an outbreak or a problem on set, and then at that point you have to shut down because you've got an active COVID situation going on. And so it's much better to really be preventive rather than not be preventive. And again, I'm not commenting on any particular production, but in general terms, that's one of the reasons why we feel testing is so important. And in fact, in the paper called The Safe Way Forward that the unions released, there's a section, part 2 of that paper, and I don't want to get too technical, but our epidemiologists that we work with put together a series of models of what could happen on a set, of actually several hundred models they ran through a computerized modeling system. And the result of that modeling was that if you have testing at a certain frequency, you can dramatically reduce the likelihood of any outbreaks on set. And that's really important for the protection of performers, but that's also really important for protection of the industry, because the industry needs to not have productions start and stop and start and stop. And one of the best ways to prevent that is to have a good, solid testing program in place. We've had a few productions, not many, but a few where one of the strategies is to actually quarantine the cast and the crew together and then try to use that as a way to help reduce the risk of an outbreak happening. There are pros and cons to each of those types of strategies, and I personally don't expect to see quarantine being widely adopted because of cost factors and other reasons attached to that. But I do think that everyone's trying to be creative and really make sure that they're not the one who has a big outbreak on their set. I don't think anybody wants that.
Nobody wants to be that person.
Yeah.
No. What are some of the things that SAG-AFTRA is doing to promote diversity and inclusion, and actually maybe even adjust to the needs that obviously are very apparent?
The first thing that I just want to mention is there are a lot of people who ask the question, people of a certain age might be more vulnerable to COVID, or people with certain medical conditions might be more vulnerable to COVID. Is it okay for employers to ask about that or to decide we're not going to cast anybody over age whatever because we are worried that they might be susceptible to COVID? And the EEOC has made it clear that's not okay. That is illegal discrimination. It's certainly not okay under our collective bargaining agreements. And we are being very proactive with employers to say, look, that's a decision that person needs to make. If they need an accommodation under the ADA, then it's your obligation as an employer to work with them to do that. So you inform the person and let the person decide what works for them, rather than making broad-based assumptions just based on a factor like age or medical condition, et cetera. In terms of our other diversity advocacy, because we're always trying to push in that direction, I think, aside from the pandemic, there's obviously a broader social movement going on right now with Black Lives Matter, and obviously that's focused on the government and policing and those kinds of areas, but I think it's led to a broader conversation that's happening about inclusion, and we're certainly interested in that. We have a structure within our organization, both from our members and our staff, where we're constantly pushing for greater inclusion in the industry. And perhaps this change in the way that production is made will provide us some opportunities to push forward in that as well.
The word media has been redefined multiple times over in a very short period of time. Now we all have platforms and streaming services and gaming and everything like that that's now under the realm of these contracts. How complicated has just even the conceit of the unions become?
Well, it's grown a lot, and it is very complicated. I mean, it's more complex than I think it ever was. We, as a union, are representing employees in really 4 different industries, because we obviously have the motion picture, television, new media industry, we have broadcast journalism, we have the music industry, and the advertising industry. So between those 4 industries, a lot of what they do is similar, but a lot of what they do is very different. And of course, our broadcast journalists and our recording artists, they have some things in common, and in some ways their work is very different. But one of the things that I think is most inspiring about working for SAG-AFTRA is watching our members stand up for each other and really seeing that solidarity. So when there's a tough contract negotiation with a broadcast station, let's say, we've got our recording artist members will come out and they will be at a rally and stand up for the rights of our other members. They really do have a sense of unity, even when they work in different areas and different industries. And so I think that's something that's really powerful and something that personally I'm very proud of.
So I imagine performers really want to know as much information as possible during these times. So is there a place that they can go to? Is there a website that they can reference updated information?
Absolutely. For the back to work process, it's right there on our website at www.sagaftra.org/back-to-work. And if people need more information about COVID-specific resources, for example, unemployment, offices, contacts for all of the 50 states, and various other resources that are specific pandemic information, that's on our website as well at www.sagaftra.org/COVID-19.
Thank you so much for all of this really interesting information, and I certainly hope that things continue to be safe and progress moving forward.
Well, thank you so much, Maria. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
All right, take care. And that's a wrap on this edition of LA Currents.